So I think for me, paper's beginnings, I'll start with paper because I need to find a way to build a model, a conceptual model. So, you'll tend to draw it out as you go along, and you're trying to think of, what are the factors that influence, what are the outcomes, what are the antecedents, what are the determinants. And so typically, I use paper a lot as part of a thinking process. It's my thinking process. I think that's why I like it so much. For me, it's very important to be the beginning of things. It's an article I read that inspires me to do something else. It's the way I start thinking about projects. It's the way I start thinking about models. And so for me, I've always associated it to beginnings. Interestingly enough, I always end up typically on screens, and I keep all the paper and I staple it and I put it in a folder and I put it somewhere. For me, it's more about that I can scribble, that I can reconnect, that I can draw things. And I find that drawing in the beginning for me is a very critical process of my thinking, so that the words are built around it. Maybe because I am the type of person who is fascinated by causality, cause-effect, and for cause-effect you need arrows and you need to draw boxes and get things done. But even if I'm preparing a class, I find it easier to draw the story on a piece of paper before I go onto my laptop and start working on the PowerPoint presentation. So for me, paper is really about that phase in my thinking process where my brain hasn't worked out the details, but I'm really interested in telling the whole story first. And that's why paper for me is so interesting. And that drive to start a thinking process and to get excited about it, to scribble it out, to change it. It's adaptable, it keeps moving. And I think most times, I've even caught myself doing something when we work on a whiteboard. I'll take a picture of it and I'll print it so I can scribble on it. And I think that to me shows me that how paper works for me. So I'm international. I was born in Denmark, moved to Lebanon, grew up in Belgium, studied in London, ended up in Portugal. Academic, but a late arrival to academia, so spent a lot of time in the corporate world. And I think for me, typically what's been driving me for a long time is this shift from the practitioner in the field to somebody who's much more interested in building what I like to call conceptual models that aim to make sense of the world around us. So I think my obsession these days is sense making. How do we make more sense of things?